911 Roundtable. And oh my gosh, we've got lots of stuff to talk about. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. Who wants to go first?
Christin has a good story to start us off with. I'm going to have her do it.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's several things that I think we could talk about this week. But why don't we start with, there was a student at the Leander ISD school board meeting last week who testified about boys masturbating in the classroom and in the hallways, and the school administrators and teachers doing nothing to stop it. It was
actually
really
it's interesting
testimony.
Incredible that a student, thank goodness she's brave enough to do that, because we need to hear those things are happening. And my guess is, if you're going to show up at the school board meeting, you've tried to accomplish this elsewhere and nobody's listening. And I'll tell you, there's another school district, I won't name it because there's some stuff going on that, but anyway, they, in that situation, they're in band class, the teachers have been absent and the boys have been watching porn. And
wow,
like almost sexually assaulting each other, basically. And so, I mean, what should we expect when we are sexualizing our children? We are sexualizing teachers. We are telling them they should be talking to kids about sex and how to do things as early as possible. We have, organizations across the state who think that this kind of stuff is not only appropriate in middle school and 4th and 5th grade, but as young as kindergarten. They need to understand that they're sexual beings or whatever. And so, I mean, this is just an absolute consequence of what we have turned our schools into. And it's heartbreaking. And honestly, it's hard to believe. I mean, if I was listening to us for the first time, I would probably shut this off, because I'm like, are you kidding me? That's what you think is going on in schools? But the reality is that kind of stuff is happening. And these are not isolated incidences. And oh, we are so messed up. How do we fix it?
Well, it is amazing to me as a guy, because, for an early age in my generation, we knew that if you got out of line like that, you were going to jail.
Yeah.
And if you are getting out of line like that, you need to go to jail.
Right. Or that you would be suspended from that school. I mean, that's just extreme behavior. And what the left is going to do with this information, and you guys probably know this already, they're going to say, see, this is why we need sex education in the schools. See, this is why we need to teach about boundaries. And this is why we need to teach about consent. And this is why we need to teach about all these things. And it's just, that kind of like, to be spiritually, the enemy's tactic of creating a problem and then saying, see, children are sexual from, just like we said, see, they need this kind of education and to end sexual violence. But what they're really doing is they're creating the problem. Our children have become so highly sexualized by this culture, which is now these ideologies have been permeating into the school and really just boiling up for years now, that this is what's going on with our kids. And it absolutely, it needs to stop. And our children need to be protected so that they can maintain that latency period of childhood where they're not exposed to this, where they're, where sexual arousal is not being triggered in children. So children are not, the whole talking point that children are sexual from birth was created by a worldview that wants to sexualize children. They're using our own children's bodies against them to then sexualize them. And this is what we're seeing. Now, Christin, is this the same story where a superintendent also responded to this incident and said that this was perfectly normal for boys to masturbate in class?
I don't believe so. I believe that was actually a separate incident that also was revealed last week. That would, yeah. And I think that, this is not something that is normal or typical, but it's occurring quite often in our schools. And I totally agree with what you're saying, Monica. I think, to me, when we cross boundaries in children, then they then demonstrate that, in their own. And I think too, we have to realize that children use behavior oftentimes to communicate things to us. But when we don't have boundaries, because that's what we're doing, is we're crossing boundaries with these books. When we're sexualizing kids, we're crossing their innate boundary of protecting themselves from, that boundary that they create through, well, you're really good at explaining this, Micah, but how they have that natural inhibition that protects them from actually partaking in sexual behavior, because it's not healthy for them to be doing that at their age. So it's just Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think about Judith Riesman and an article that she wrote about involuntary sexual arousal. And that happens a lot with both children who are being sexually abused or anyone who has been sexually violated, even as an adult, that the body, works contrary to what is happening in reality. So you're being violated sexually, but your body responds in a sexual way. And that is part of the trauma that children or adults who've been raped experience, because they're thinking, this was wrong. Why did my body react? And it's considered an involuntary reaction. And so what's happening with these with people and this worldview, this whole culture that is sexualizing our children, they know it's going to bring up feelings in them. Even if what they're watching is traumatic, even if what they're hearing is traumatic, even if this happening, like the masturbate, all these different things, they're going to react negatively to them, but their body responds. And it's as if it's contrary to their morality, contrary to what they was right or wrong. And it can be very confusing for both children and adults, more so for children. And this is why we need laws, and we need adults, and we need parents who can protect children from this kind of behavior, these kinds of teachings, and these sexual violations. Lee, you're perfectly right that if someone is masturbating in public, that is a criminal offense. And it is traumatizing the people around them. And if it's a child that's doing that, then that child needs psychological help and spiritual help and help from their parents. Now, is this happening in some school districts? I believe that it is. Obviously, we're seeing it here. And I think it's a time where, whether people like it or not, it's a time that we need to recognize that we need parent leadership. And in my, as y'all know, as a Christian, we need to bring the word of God back into our families and in our communities. That for me, that's always going to be the solution. I know it could be different for the three of you, maybe, but this is just we're going beyond the bounds of what is normal and what is healthy, and we're calling it good, and we're saying, put more money, put more government money, put more government programs, bring more nonprofits into the school to talk about sex. And that's
which is the exact opposite of what we need to be doing. And I'm just thinking, okay, so I feel like I've been really involved in my kid's life, and I've had to get overly involved if you compare it to what the average parent is doing. And probably all of us would agree, it takes some very purposeful effort to parent now. Not that it didn't take that before, but people around thinking of my grandparents as we're having this conversation, thinking, oh my gosh, they are like blushing in heaven and hiding their eyes and closing their ears. Are like, I cannot believe my granddaughter is on a live screen talking about masturbation in public schools. I mean, it is so messed up. And I'm just thinking, okay, so the average parent who maybe hasn't been involved in their kid's life as much as they wish they could. Maybe they're working 2 jobs, or maybe they're a single parent. I mean, who knows? There are lots of different things that could be going on that have caused us to step away and say, state, I trust you. State, I'm dropping my kid off, and I am expecting this to be a safe environment for them. And what has happened is certain entities have infiltrated our schools and made our schools unsafe, not just from a shooter or those types of violent things that we think of, but think about this act in a classroom, and that it in itself, like Monica said, is a crime, or like Lee said, we as parents, we have to take the reins. If we are not currently holding the reins when it comes to directing everything related to our children, we need to take them back. And if for some reason you don't know how to do that, like maybe you're a parent that was raised to think, gosh, I was supposed to be a friend to my kid and I'm not really supposed to parent them. I know a lot of people in my generation, that's really what the approach they have taken to parenting. And we need to take back the parent reins. We need to put down the friend reins, because our children are being absolutely decimated. And I 100% agree with Monica. I think it is a lack of God. But for those people that maybe that's a struggle or not where they want to focus, this is just scientific, period. It is scientific.
Let's face it, children.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's face it, children need morals, manners, etiquette, discipline. And that's what traditionally that comes from the family, and then the schools reflected that. Now, who knows how it's happening in families, and the schools have gone to feelings and me, not doing things for your fellows, but how do you feel?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a lot of it, is that, we don't have that base of morals, manners, etiquette, and discipline. And, while we may not want schools becoming the arbiter of morals, especially after that story, I would think that the schools should reflect the morals of the community.
Yeah, I think this is a good segue into one of the other, I think, big things, at least legislatively right now in this past week, is we saw the Speaker of the House announce 4 of his priorities or priority legislation, which included social media protections for children. And we've seen a lot of other bills filed, but his bill that he has prioritized is HB 18 by Shelby Slauson. And but I think what's been interesting about our generation of parents is that we have probably one of the first generation of kids, maybe you're, and Lee, you too, your kids are how old?
All of my kids are in their 30s.
Okay. So I think it started with your generation and your kids, is that instead of playing outside in the neighborhood by themselves without parents hovering, now they play inside on the internet without parents hovering. And we switched what we thought, I think that there was a lot of fear sold to us about our kids playing outside. And we replaced it with indoor play and a lot of internet play. And the technology is absolutely destroying our children. Mm-hmm. It is. And we didn't, and I know Melissa and I have something in common with we have an age span between our kids. Your kids, you have older kids who are in high school, one in high school. I have an older son who's about to graduate from high school, and then I have a young son who's 7. And I can tell you that my oldest son was part of that first generation of where technology really became a part of their lives, a part of the classroom, and social media became a big part of their lives. And what we know now in that 10-year gap between my oldest son and my youngest son is information that all parents should take and respond to, and keep your kids off the internet and off social media, because it is addictive and it's a dangerous space for them, and it's being used to bully, but it's, again, very addictive, and it's doing things to the our brains we have that neuroplasticity to our brains. It's literally changing our brains. And so I'm really glad to see the Texas legislature address this, and we need to get it out of our schools.
We do. And, since I do have a 5-year-old, I just want to any parents that are watching that have young kids, and maybe your kids, you've allowed them to be on the devices too much. I'm one of those parents, and I had to pull that back. And I'll tell you, the first time I tried to do that, nonstop fit all the time because of that addiction that you are talking about. But I asserted my parental rights. I didn't allow, that to get him his device back. And I had to really dig in, and I had to hold myself accountable because it was too easy to just, well, right now, just go ahead and get on the device. And I'm still working on that. It's still something that I have not 100% cut off. And just, again, hearing Christin today and just reinforcing that I'm being too permissive, and we have to help each other, and we have to stand up. And one thing I was going to mention earlier is, if you do feel like you need help reasserting those parental rights, Monica Cline is the person you want to reach out to. It takes a family, and she will help you. She has access to resources, and, we have to step up and help each other, and we have to figure out how to take back the parenting role of our generation, because we've abdicated it to the state.
Well, and I want to go back to what Lee mentioned earlier, and someone, I think it was Summer Broom here on social media, who said repeated what Lee said: morals, manners, etiquette, and discipline. Nailed it. And that is, you can't learn that on social media. You can't learn that being on technology all day. You don't learn that by watching a cartoon, even if it is Dora the Explorer. I don't know if that is even a show anymore, or if she hasn't gone woke. You can't learn that on a screen. You learn that with human interaction. And you learn it also not just by teaching it, but being corrected in relationship with other people. So you do something that is bad manners, you're corrected. That won't happen if you're on a screen. And it has to happen with human connection. And I do believe that not only is the social media itself bombarding our children with things that are not healthy, but the fact that they don't have human relationships, communication, or interaction is another reason why I believe that we have these skyrocketing rates of depression and suicidal ideation, because they do not have human relationship. Whether they're children, teenagers, young adults, the lack of true communication face-to-face is dying. And we need to resurrect that, because that is what we need as humans. Artificial intelligence, the future of AI, is going to destroy humanity. As interesting as it is, as curious as we may be to see technology do some amazing things, there is nothing healthier or more amazing than hearts and minds, human hearts and minds coming together, face to face, interacting and working together. And so parents, that's one of the things that I just want to emphasize is, remember that your children don't need technology. When you think about what your children need, they need their family, they need protection, they need love, they need shelter, they need food, they need air to breathe, and they need humanity. They need interaction with one another. Technology is not a need. It's an extra. And so that's one of the things. And Melissa, we did the same thing with our son. We bought an Xbox. This is years ago, but he's now 23. And we bought it really for the DVD player, because no one was really selling DVD players anymore back then. And then we thought, well, maybe we'll let him play a video game. Well, he couldn't stop thinking about the video games before he even had a chance to even play it. That we could see there was this addiction to it, that we just said no video games whatsoever, because we knew it wasn't a need. It just it wasn't something he needed. It wasn't something that was going to hurt him by not having it. Lee, you're reacting to that.
Yeah. So and parents need to remember that some of the content that their children are being exposed to is being forwarded by paid influencers. Somebody who looks like you, has a great story, and it turns out he's being sponsored by somebody. You got to pay attention. Is it live or is it Memorex? Also, there's just so much to back up what you're saying. The CDC put out a report about, how kids did during lockdown, and the kids who maintained social connections had less depression, et cetera, et cetera. And then getting out from it behind a screen and actually playing and exercising. Well, there's an article out from yesterday in Neuroscience News about how exercise is more effective than medications. And it went on to say even therapy in depression and things like that. So why don't we do the normal and the simple rather than trying to reinvent the wheel and reinvent
Because it
morals?
doesn't make money.
Well, and that's something we need to keep in mind, because so far in watching the finance hearings, I haven't seen any big push for, a couple of $100 million for coaches to
Right.
improve our kids' well-being.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that would be money much better spent than millions of dollars towards anything else other than actual classroom activity. Because, I think about, we used to move around when we were at school, even in the classrooms where we didn't have computers and we were just sitting at the desk and we were doing English. We might get up and read rather than just sit in our desk. There were different things we were allowed to do. And I was thinking back to, I don't know, I was in grade school and I lived in a small Kansas town, but because we didn't have technology, and Mom, I'm bored. Mom, I'm bored. Well, guess what I ended up doing? I ended up developing a relationship with an elderly woman down the block. And I would go over and have cookies and juice with her or something like that because I was bored. But it ended up being like this incredible relationship. And our kids aren't getting those kinds of things. They're not having to figure out what to do when I'm bored. And they're not having to, maybe I should do something for somebody else because I've already done all the things for me.
Right. In our house, bored was a code word for, there's some work you should be doing, son.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I think we said it in a previous podcast where I said, boredom is really what helps us to be inventive and to be creative. It's you're welcome if you're bored. Now go find something interesting to do or learn to ride a bike, and as Ibri got older, my son got older, I remember one day he complained about how his friends were so boring because they were all sitting at home on a video game talking to each other through the video game. And Ibri, since we removed that from his life, we taught him how to ride a motorcycle. And he did motocross, not professionally. I'm not saying he was great at it, but he enjoyed it. And so he was out on his motorbike. We built a soapbox derby car. So we had to become inventive, and do that and experiment with that. Had some crashes, but it was fun. He learned how to longboard. Now, all of these activities may sound high risk to some parents, and they're like, I don't want to do that. But you can do other things. But Ibri was like, I can longboard, I can ride a motorcycle, I can do all these things, and my friends are really boring. But he needed friends who were also just as active, and it's healthier for them to be that active.
And Christin,
It is, and it's actually. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's healthy for them to take risks too. So, Monica, when you talk about risky, some parents would say that, well, this is risky. Well, there's a lot of research on appropriate risk taking for kids and how that develops them. And so, climbing trees, there's a certain risk. They're able, when you allow kids the opportunity to partake in these so-called kind of risky behaviors like climbing a tree, riding a bike, things where they may fall and get hurt. Those are things that allow them to develop all these social emotional skills that they need, that when they develop, it makes them more successful adults. Get them to learn emotional control. And so we have replaced that with passive activities that are addictive, that are antisocial. And I love that you bring up the video games because that's sort of where it started, I think. And, I think as a generation of parents, we absolutely need, as professionals, as people who work in policy, we need to get it out of our schools. We need to do whatever we can at the local issue, at the state level. But I think as a generation of parents, we need to start assessing maybe our own relationship with technology and with social media and what we're modeling. I know I need to do it and put limits on it because we're all addicted to it as well. And then our kids watch us, and really what we say is a lot less important than what we do and model for them. But if we can't handle it as adults, then how are kids able to handle it? Well, they can't. And so anyway, it's just so interesting though. I love having these conversations with y'all because, something new comes up into the conversation. So like that risk behavior that's appropriate for children. it's actually I just want to reiterate, it's so important for kids to be able to take risks.
And they need to be able to fail. We've basically made it, the whole, we always frustrated with the whole, okay, soccer time for young kids. Everybody gets a trophy. No, everybody should not get a trophy because that says we all are awesome at soccer. And so how are we supposed to know who is a really great soccer player and who might be great at something else? God gave us all different gifts, and we can't, if we're always giving out participation trophies, our children aren't figuring out what they're good at. I mean, God love my 16-year-old kid, but he's, to him, an 89 is, Mom, I almost got an A. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, it was almost an A, couldn't you just, for the longest time, they've been giving honor roll awards to A and B recipients. Well, so what did that teach my kid? That taught my kid that 80% is good enough or whatever that, and I'm going to get recognized the same as the person who got a 98. And we've convinced ourselves that that's a good thing. And all it does is make our kids have less confidence because they don't know what they're good at. It is good to fail because then we figure out where to pivot to. And we have so messed up. There's so much done.
Yeah, being told that you did great when you failed, what message does that send?
Well, and I think that there's also, I don't know if the right word is humbling, but I think it's really healthy to know, hey, I'm really good at volleyball, but I'm not going to get a scholarship to play volleyball. But I'm really good at public speaking, and I'm going to have a career in public speaking. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay. It's okay to enjoy volleyball, be pretty good at it, but it's okay. I can accept the fact that I'm not the best. And so there's something healthy about that. And I wanted to ask Lee, when Christin was talking about the video games, it just occurred to me that I've met several parents who are just so proud of their children who excel at playing a video game and how good they are and that they're competing at these video games. And then it just made me realize in our conversations that video games are actually, and Lee, you might know a study about this with addiction, but the video games are actually set up so that you can kind of get used to it or get good at it, which is what makes it so addictive, which means that you will buy it more, spend more time on it and buy more. And so it's not really a sense of achievement to be good at a video game. And if we're limiting our children's confidence and saying that they've built a skill by playing a video game, then we're really hurting our kids.
Since we deal with rights in mental health, I haven't dealt so much with studies on video games, but a session or two ago, probably 2, maybe 3, there was there was a lot of debate over this and how video games were being designed to addict kids. So there may be some truth to that. Now that I've seen some of the articles on social media being used to indoctrinate, now I'm starting to go, well, gosh, I wonder how much product placement or values manipulation is going on in video games as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if I created a video game, I would want to set it up in such a way that it would make you feel good, that you would feel some sense of achievement because that'll ensure that you're going to keep playing my video game and I'll keep making money.
Yes.
So they're not set up for you to fail. They're set up for you to quote unquote achieve, but that's not really an achievement that our children need in order to be successful in this society.
Yeah.
And
that's right. And as far as product placement goes, there was when my youngest son was in his teens, there was a first-person shooter game that he played. And one of the things you could get to help you shoot was diazepam, which I believe is Valium.
Oh my goodness.
So why would you? Okay, great. It's going to steady you down. What a horrible thing to implant in a video game.
Exactly.
Well, and I know we're going to have to go. I just want to say one more thing, that some of the worst books that we find in our school libraries also, they have placement of social media and different apps that they encourage kids to go to. And I mean apps like Grindr.
Right.
Or, So there's a book called Trans Plus that I think takes kids to like 75 different apps that are not safe for kids. And so all of that is coming out in this Texas legislative session because we're all, we're working on that legislatively. But it's just, I think one more thing to, schools should not be promoting anything that is harmful to children, period.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, we do need to go. Thank you guys so much. This was an awesome conversation. Who imagined this is where we'd end up today? But have a great week. We'll see you guys back next Monday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.